Most people don't realize this. You don't stay soft forever. Life forces a decision. You either crack or you become something dangerous. There is no middle ground. Florence, 1512. They came for Niccolò Machiavelli before the city was even awake, dragged him out, broke him, stripped him of his title, his influence, his identity. Then they threw him onto a forgotten farm outside Florence and waited for history to swallow him whole. Most men would have crumbled under that weight. Most would have spent those long, quiet days drowning in regret, reliving every wrong turn, asking the ceiling why. But Machiavelli did something they never anticipated. He went cold. He sat down in the silence of that exile, and he studied them, the men who had destroyed him. He pulled apart their methods like a surgeon, mapped their psychological patterns, traced every move they had made until he understood the architecture beneath it all. What came out of that process was not a diary of grief. It was not a cry for mercy. It was The Prince. The most feared, most banned, most misunderstood book in the history of human thought. Not a guide to becoming good. A guide to understanding power so completely, so ruthlessly, that no one could ever reduce you again. Here is the thing most people get wrong about power. They think it belongs to whoever has the most resources, the most connections, the most status. Machiavelli learned something far more unsettling, sitting in that exile. Power belongs to whoever understands the game, and the game has never changed. Not in 500 years. The same psychological mechanisms, the same human weaknesses, the same predictable moves dressed up in new clothes and played out in new settings. Every betrayal you have experienced follows a pattern someone else has experienced before. Every manipulation attempt runs on the same underlying code. Every moment someone tried to make you feel small, they were using a system. And systems can be learned. This is not about healing from what happened to you. It is not about becoming a kinder, softer, more forgiving version of yourself. This is about understanding the operating system beneath every human interaction so thoroughly that you become a different kind of person entirely. Someone who sees the trap from 20 feet away. Someone who recognizes the opening move of a game before anyone else has realized a game has started. If you are here to study power instead of nurse pain, say this in the comments right now. I study power, not pain. Because what follows is not motivation. It is not philosophy in the abstract sense. It is a system. And once it is in your mind, you cannot think the old way again. Here is the first thing Machiavelli decoded in that exile. And it rewires everything once you absorb it. Chaos is not random. It has structure. It has patterns. And patterns can be defeated. He called this force Fortuna. Not luck in the way we use the word today. Something harder than that. A hostile current running through reality itself. One that will sweep away everything you build unless you understand how it moves. Every plan that collapsed unexpectedly. Every relationship that imploded without warning. Every opportunity that slipped through your hands at the worst possible moment. That is Fortuna operating. And most people think it is unpredictable, which is precisely why they keep losing to it. Machiavelli saw something different. He described Fortuna as a raging river. When it floods, everything in the lowlands is destroyed. But the flood was never truly unforeseeable. People build in the flood zone and act surprised when the water rises. Fortuna only destroys those who refuse to prepare. He was precise about it. Fortuna governs roughly half of what happens to you. The other half belongs entirely to your own capacity to respond. He called that capacity virtue, but not the word, as churches use it. Virtue, to Machiavelli, meant the raw ability to impose your will on an indifferent world, to see what is coming before it arrives. To build structures that hold when pressure mounts, to move aggressively when weakness appears in your environment. Think back to your worst moments, the betrayal that blindsided you, The collapse you swore came from nowhere. Look at it honestly, and you will almost always find the signals that were there months before. The friend who turned on you had been showing you who they were. The partnership that fell apart had fault lines you could feel if you pressed on them. You did not miss the signs because they were invisible. You missed them because you were not yet in the habit of reading the room. Machiavelli also wrote something that still cuts against comfortable thinking. Fortuna favors the aggressive. Not the young specifically, but those who refuse to be passive when the current pushes against them. The timid build walls and hope the river stays calm. The powerful build channels and redirect the current toward their own ends. The question is not whether disruption is coming. It is always coming. The question is what you are building right now, in the calm, so that when it arrives, you are not the one getting swept away. Here's where most people get this completely wrong. If you are done hoping safety will find you and ready to engineer it yourself, drop this in the comments. I do not pray to survive the storm. I become the storm. The most dangerous discovery Machiavelli made about human psychology is also the most uncomfortable one, because it exposes something about all of us. He wrote that men judge more by their eyes than by their hands, which means that most people are responding to the surface of things, not the substance. They do not have the time, the access, or the analytical desire to investigate what is actually true. They see what is presented to them, and they make decisions from that point. This is not a flaw in a few people. It is a feature of how human perception operates under normal conditions, and it is your greatest strategic advantage if you choose to use it. Machiavelli outlined 5 qualities that the powerful must appear to embody: mercy, faith, humanity, integrity, and piety. He chose the word appear deliberately, because the brutal reality is this: someone who genuinely possesses all 5 of those qualities all of the time, without calculation or flexibility, will be dismantled by the people around them who do not. This is not permission to become deceptive as a personality trait. It is an instruction in perception management. The most effective people you have ever encountered, in any field, are not operating without strategy. They project confidence in moments of internal uncertainty. They display calm while running complex calculations beneath the surface. They appear generous in ways that serve larger objectives. That is not dishonesty. That is engineering. The broader population, those Machiavelli referred to as the vulgar, which simply means the majority, will take the surface presentation at face value because they want to. Because believing the easy story requires less energy than questioning it. They see composure and interpret it as mastery. They see consistency and assume alignment with their values. They see a curated exterior and do not go looking for what is behind it. The skill is in the switching. You maintain the appearance of mercy without surrendering the capacity for hard decisions. You project consistency without becoming rigidly predictable. You manage the image without losing the strategic flexibility that makes you effective. Your reputation is not your personality. It is an instrument. People respond to who they believe you are long before they ever discover who you actually are. This is the part nobody wants to admit. And in most cases, the belief shapes the entire relationship. If you are done waiting to be understood and ready to control what people actually see, comment this: they see what I allow. But before we go further, if this is already shifting how you see things, do me one favor right now. Hit the like button and subscribe to this channel. More of history's most dangerous psychological frameworks are coming, and you do not want to be the person who stumbles on this material 2 years late. Subscribe and stay ahead. Machiavelli wrote that there are 2 methods of conflict: the method of law, which belongs to human beings, and the method of force, which belongs to animals. But he did not say choose one. He said the person who relies only on one will not last. He narrowed it further. Among the animals, you must be two specific creatures simultaneously, the lion and the fox. The lion is overwhelming, undeniable force. It commands territory. When someone crosses a boundary you have drawn, when someone mistakes your patience for passivity, the lion is what reminds them of the error. Swift, decisive, unmistakable. The lion does not issue lengthy warnings. It acts, and the memory of that action lasts. But the lion is blind to traps. Pure force has no peripheral vision. It walks directly into snares, set by minds more subtle than its own. The fox sees the trap before committing to a direction. It reads what is underneath the surface of a situation. It recognizes the shape of a manipulation before it has fully formed. It negotiates when negotiation creates advantage, retreats when retreat is the smarter move, and stays fluid in ways that confuse more rigid opponents. But the fox cannot survive open confrontation with something larger and more powerful. In a direct fight, the fox loses. The person who can move between both natures, who knows when to deploy force and when to deploy intelligence, who can be decisive and adaptive in the same hour if the situation demands it, that person is genuinely difficult to deal with. They cannot be cornered because they do not have only one mode. Most people are locked into a single strategy, perpetually aggressive or perpetually accommodating, always suspicious or always trusting. That consistency is what makes them easy to outmaneuver. You can see the move before they make it because they only have one move. You read the situation first, then you choose the nature. Watch this carefully. This is where people expose themselves without realizing it. Open threat, direct challenge, someone testing whether you will actually follow through. Lion, hidden agenda, layered dynamics, unclear motivations, someone presenting a situation that does not feel like what it is. Fox. Machiavelli documented one of history's most calculated political maneuvers, and if you extract the principle correctly, it changes how you handle every difficult situation in your life. Cesare Borgia needed to bring order to a lawless region. He appointed a brutal lieutenant named Ramiro de Orco and handed him unchecked authority to do it. Ramiro delivered. The chaos was crushed, but the methods used to crush it were so savage that the population began to associate that cruelty with Borgia himself. Borgia's response was surgical. He had Ramiro arrested, cut in two, and displayed publicly. One action, multiple objectives. The people received justice and redirected their anger. Borgia appeared to care about their suffering. And every person watching learned precisely where the line was. Machiavelli called this well-used cruelty. Not cruelty as a personality, cruelty as a precise instrument. Swift, finite, and then converted into something that generates benefit. The alternative, what he called badly used cruelty, is what most people actually do. Half-hearted consequences. Suggestions of boundaries without enforcement. Second chances extended to people who have already revealed their nature. This approach does not reduce problems. It multiplies them because it signals that your lines are negotiable. The principle translates directly. When you end a relationship, a partnership, an access arrangement of any kind, you end it completely, not gradually. Not with mixed signals designed to manage the other person's emotions at the expense of your own clarity. You make the cut clean enough that the lesson it teaches does not require explanation. The goal is not to be cruel. The goal is to be clear. One definitive action communicates more than 100 warnings. One unmistakable boundary sets the standard for every future interaction. When people understand that you will actually follow through, they stop running tests. Most people hesitate here, and that hesitation is exactly why they get disrespected. Machiavelli's most disturbing insight is also his most useful one, because it removes a particular kind of suffering from your life the moment you accept it. He wrote that human beings are, by nature, ungrateful, inconsistent, and self-interested, that they pursue their own benefit and retreat from genuine risk. He was not describing a character flaw in specific individuals. He was describing the baseline code that governs behavior across the species. This is not cynicism. It is pattern recognition applied at scale. Every betrayal you have experienced, every broken commitment, every moment when someone chose their comfort over your trust. Examine any of them closely enough, and you will find the same logic operating underneath. Not malice, just self-interest asserting itself when the cost of loyalty exceeded the benefit. Here is why this changes everything. If you build your life assuming people will routinely transcend their own self-interest for your benefit, you are constructing something on a foundation that cannot hold. But if you design your relationships and systems to work with human nature rather than against it, everything stabilizes, gratitude expires. It is not a permanent state. People who owe you something eventually begin to resent the debt rather than honor it. Loyalty is conditional, not absolute. The person who would stand with you in a comfortable situation may calculate differently when the stakes rise. This is not a reason to hate people. It is a reason to stop being surprised when they behave like people. If this feels uncomfortable, good. It means you're seeing reality without filters. You stop building relationships on the assumption of goodness and start building them on the architecture of mutual interest. You create conditions where the cost of abandoning you exceeds the benefit. You earn respect through demonstrated strength rather than earned affection through continuous generosity. Every painful experience you have survived contains information. The question is whether you extracted it or simply endured it. Machiavelli himself is the proof of concept. He was tortured. He was humiliated. He lost everything that had defined his identity. And rather than spending that experience in grief, he treated it as a laboratory. He examined the men who had destroyed him with the dispassion of a scientist. What methods had they used? What psychological pressure points had they exploited? What patterns in his own behavior had made him vulnerable? From that analysis came the framework that outlasted everyone who tried to erase him. Here is the protocol. When someone harms you, your first job is to feel it, because suppression is not strength. But your second job, the one that most people skip, is to dissect it. What did this reveal about where your defenses were thin? What signals did you dismiss because you preferred to believe the story they were telling over the behavior they were demonstrating? What pattern, now that you see it clearly, have you encountered before in different clothing? The person who helped you extensively and then disappeared when they no longer needed the connection just demonstrated something specific about how investment without reciprocity functions. The ally who shifted sides when the power dynamic changed just taught you something precise about what their loyalty was actually attached to. The opportunity you lost because you hesitated just gave you real data on what indecision costs. None of this is personal. All of it is information. Ordinary people learn from their own mistakes. Strategic people learn from the maneuvers of those who successfully worked against them. Your past, properly examined, becomes the most sophisticated early warning system you will ever have access to. This is where the weak repeat cycles and the strategic break out of them. Protecting your psychological space is not the same as isolating yourself from the world. Most people confuse the two, and the confusion is expensive. Real protection is not a wall, it is a filtering system. Sophisticated, consistent, and non-negotiable. Think of your mental environment as territory with a border. Not everyone is entitled to cross it. The protocol is simple in description and demanding in practice. Every person, every recurring dynamic, every invitation into your time and attention passes through a single question. Does this add coherence and strength to my world, or does it introduce noise and disorder? The ones who consistently bring chaos, inconsistency, emotional manipulation, or draining complexity get moved to the outer perimeter, not with dramatic announcements, not with lengthy explanations that invite debate, with quiet, steady distance. What this creates is something Machiavelli would have recognized immediately. Your emotional clarity becomes a kind of mirror. People who operate through manipulation find that their usual approaches do not produce the expected response. People who rely on guilt and obligation as leverage discover that leverage does not function here. And most of them will not respond to this with admiration. They will call you cold. They will say something has changed in you, usually not as a compliment. They will attempt to reframe your standards as a personal failing. That response is data. It tells you exactly what they were accessing before you adjusted the filter. The people worth having in your life respond differently. They respect a standard. They understand that someone who protects their own clarity is someone operating at a higher level. Quality recognizes quality. And this is exactly the point where your life starts to change, or stays the same. There is a certain kind of presence that reorganizes a room without announcing itself. You have felt it. Someone enters a space, and something shifts. Conversations adjust. The social architecture rearranges itself. Nobody can quite explain why this person commands the dynamic without visibly performing for it. Machiavelli understood this. He wrote that the powerful must project strength even in moments of genuine vulnerability, because perception does not wait for facts to catch up. The story people tell about you is written in the first few interactions, and it is very difficult to revise afterward. But the mechanism behind this kind of gravity is not performance. Performance is detectable, and once detected, it collapses. The mechanism is scarcity. Most people are structurally desperate to be seen and validated. They oversell their positions. They over-explain their decisions. They chase agreement and become visibly uncomfortable with indifference. That desperation does not read as enthusiasm. It reads as need. And need reads as weakness. You operate differently. Your attention is not freely distributed. Your words are not wasted on arguments that have no outcome worth achieving. Your presence in someone's world is not guaranteed by their assumption of access. When you are genuinely not chasing approval, the social dynamic inverts. People begin to wonder what you know that they do not. They notice that you remain composed in situations where they feel pressured. They observe that you never seem to require external validation to function. That stillness reads as competence, even in contexts where your actual credentials are unknown. And then your silence becomes leverage. When you do not react, people fill the silence, usually with more information than they intended to provide. You are not performing mystery. You are simply no longer performing at all. And that absence of performance becomes the most interesting thing in the room. Now, step back for a second, because this is where everything connects. What you now possess is not a collection of separate ideas. It is a single, integrated system. You read Fortuna's patterns before they arrive, and you build accordingly. You manage the perception others hold of you with the same intentionality you bring to any other strategic objective. You move between force and intelligence as the situation demands, never locked into a single mode. You make decisions that are clean and final, so that the lessons they teach do not need to be repeated. You see human behavior as a consistent pattern to be worked with, rather than an exception to be mourned. You extract intelligence from every painful experience, rather than simply surviving it. You govern access to your psychological space with genuine standards. And your presence carries weight, not because you demanded it, but because you stopped distributing yourself carelessly. This is what Machiavelli was building toward in that exile. Not a theory, a system. One so complete that external chaos cannot breach the internal structure. One so well calibrated that other people's emotional turbulence does not determine your decisions. One so thoroughly internalized that you operate from choice in almost every situation, rather than reaction. When this becomes how you actually move through the world, people notice, without being able to articulate what changed. They hesitate before testing you. They extend a different kind of regard. They respect boundaries they never watched you draw, because those boundaries are legible in the way you carry yourself. You stop being someone that things happen to. You become someone who shapes what happens. If that shift has already started in you, if you recognize it, drop this in the comments. I am no longer becoming, I simply am. The world adjusts accordingly. The Prince is not a historical document. It is a living framework, and it is yours now. Use it. If this changed how you see the game, hit the like button now. Subscribe to this channel if you are serious about understanding the psychology of power at a level most people never reach. This is not a lesson for everyone. It is for the few who would rather understand the system than complain about it. The ones who scroll past will keep being surprised by the same moves. The ones who stay will not. Which one are you? And how much longer can you afford to stay that way?